So today we're very lucky to have a very experienced researcher here, Phase. And Phase, welcome, bro, for taking your time. You've been really supportive. You've been here so many times. And having someone of your importance and knowledge here is really important for us. Thank you so much for coming here. And I guess I want to start with a little bit of your background history, maybe even before development, the cool things you're doing, and if there's anything you don't want to talk about, like state, location, just avoid it. Okay?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, first off, thanks for having me here. I'm super honored. I wish I could be around a bit more, but like I don't know. Sometimes I think you just have to focus on your things, and then it happens that you can't be so active in every Discord or something. But yeah, I grew up in Germany. I'm like I'm 28 years old. Um, I studied mathematics and have always kind of been programming on the side, but mostly just for kind of my own interest and for fun. Got into machine learning, did a bunch of like machine learning courses, started going into machine learning research. Um, and then I discovered blockchain technology pretty late. It was actually like the peak of the bull run, May 2021 was the first time that I really researched it myself and like actually spent some time trying to figure out what the technology is about and like what you can actually do with it. I was pretty fascinated with it, and at the time, like when doing machine learning research, I think I had a few experiences that made me realize or made me just question whether I wanted to continue in that field. I mean, for one, just having this incredibly long feedback loop of, you make a change to your model, you test some new assumption or do anything, and then you train your whole data, your model again, and then sometimes it takes a day if you're lucky, and sometimes a few days. And only then do you actually know if there was a bug in your code or not. That and also the whole pressure of publishing research. That was something I could feel for the team, and in the end, it led to some decisions which I didn't think were that great. But anyways, yeah, got into blockchain technology and like just coded around a bit more, and I just really loved the experience. I loved that everything was like the whole feedback loop and development is so tighter there. Like you actually just code something, you get the result, and yeah, I mean everything in the space is like there's a lot of action going on. It's always exciting. Like I feel like every day when I read Twitter, there's like some new shit show going on or so, which keeps it pretty entertaining.
That's pretty nice, bro. Can you talk a little bit of your daily work at Tree of Beats, what you're doing, and what is your main occupation in there?
Yeah, so I joined in November as an apprentice, and am a full-time security engineer now. Um, Mainly spend time on auditing. We also get some time which we can just spend on like some useful research projects or internal tooling or creating some kind of content or whatever. Um, so in that regards, I also had this blog post about arithmetic checks, for example, which I had been working on to get into like the secure contracts page of Trail of Bits. It's supposed to be some kind of subsection there just to learn a bit more about the EVM. Um, yeah, so I mean, in the end, it's mostly like 70% of my time is supposed to be on audits, and then 30% is like for yeah, whatever else is there to do.
What do you think Trail of Beats does differently from other places because they're very respected?
Um, I mean, 12 bits has been in the space for just a really long time, and I think I think what I personally really like about being in Trail of Bits is that just there it's not just blockchain, and there are different teams working on different kinds of audits, and we like just for as an example, we have like a cryptography team which is super strong, and they can do different types of audits, and it's just like super fascinating to listen in and to see them work. And I also kind of have my own interest in learning more about that, and maybe hopefully doing a bit more of that. But yeah, also just general type of assurance audits is pretty common there. So I think what TrailBits can do is not just audit blockchain code, but like whole systems, or I don't know, wallets or some kind of cryptographic scheme.
But what is the key to be so flexible, to be able to understand these things and go down in detail? Because when we actually know some technology, it's easy for us to do some reverse engineering, maybe go through the bytecode and see some problems. But when you get a blockchain, could be a whole new technology, or when you get some new cryptographic algorithm, could be a whole new mathematical concept. How do you test these things?
Um, so are you thinking like of new cryptographic schemes, for example? I'm not sure if I can give you
Let's yeah, let's
such a good
just
answer on that, but
let's just think about blockchain. So if I get a new blockchain, new layer one coded in Rust,
mhm.
what is the process to understand that and actually audit it?
Yeah, good question. But so I personally, I don't see myself as having like extremely much experience. By the way, there's some feedback in the back. Oh yeah, thanks. But as it happens, currently I'm actually looking at some I'd call it something like a L1 system, and it's I have to say it's pretty daunting going from something like just looking at normal smart contracts to a full blockchain system. But I think and what I noticed here as well is that you kind of have to change the way you approach the whole audit process. So whereas with like traditional smart contracts, or I mean, there are many different approaches that you can use in auditing like a smart contract. But what I noticed here in this case is that you can't just like run at it and look at the code bit by bit, and then after 1 or 2 weeks you're going to have a good enough understanding of the whole system, and then you just kind of know how things work. In this case, because the whole code is just like so big and there are like so many interdependencies. Um, I mean, the good thing is here that we can work in a team. So, like for example, we can split up different parts of the code and maybe say, okay, this part of the team is going to look at how how this part works, and then we're going to have like these kind of internal meetings where we just present that part to the other part, which just kind of helps you. I mean, if my my understanding is that if you're able to explain something to someone else in simple terms, then and that's when you've kind of like understood that part, and that's kind of what we've been doing for this like current audit. And yeah, I guess the goal is like by doing that, you're going to be way quicker than if you were just a solo auditor.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And bro, I want to talk a little bit about your backstory into blockchain because I see you're involved in some really deep and nice research like early on. I was looking into ERC 721M, the whole thing with stake and minting and being able to stake so many and batch mint and batch stake a lot of tokens. How did you guys even come to that? Because it seems like something we just start exploring, bytecode optimization, everything. Like, we just got better at Huff and everything. Why? What kind of research you were doing at that point?
I mean, it's been around for quite some time, I'd say, like low level optimization. Sorry. And of course, like if you're into that and also batch minting, you're definitely going to know about vectorized or optimizer on Twitter. And that's also, I guess, kind of how I got into it. I still remember in the beginning when I was looking at how the batch mint worked, and I had my own ideas and of like how you could make that more efficient, and some of them actually got integrated into like ERC-721A. For example, like there's this flag that sets whether the next token ID has been already initialized or not, and if you do that, then you don't have like an extra storage load that you can avoid. But after going through that, like I'd seen like Vectorize it present some kind of like some assembly code, and at the time it was just like totally foreign to me, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. And I guess I kind of understood it better once I tried to like write some minimal proxies with bytecode. Um, but yeah, I mean, in the end, it might look a bit daunting, but once you get the hang of it, I think it helps you really understand also what Solidity does in a way deeper way, because so I touched on those kind of things a bit in like one of the blog posts, like on arithmetic checks, that, for example, there's implicit stuff that happens in the background, like the Solidity compiler creates some kind of implicit operations that you don't necessarily notice if you just look at the Solidity code and without inspecting the bytecode. And stuff like that can actually come and kind of bite you in the back. For example, like a recent issue I saw was that if you kind of specify your own ERC20 interface and you use it to transfer a token, and the interface specifies that you have to have a return value of a Boolean. But in the end, you want to write the code so that it can handle like non-standard ERC20 tokens that don't return any Boolean. And then you just use that function to transfer tokens, but you don't do anything with the return value. You just ignore it. And then you expect that to handle both cases. But what the Solidity compiler actually does is, because you've specified that this function should return a Boolean value, it includes a implicit check in the code to check the return data if it's 32 bytes, and it throws if it doesn't, if it doesn't appear. So I mean that it's also pretty interesting to look at the intermediate representation that is generated from the compiler. So if you compile Solidity code with the -- IR, the IR flag, then you can actually see the YUL code that is produced. And I think also just looking at that code is really helpful in understanding how Solidity works on a deeper level.
That's a really good tip right in there. And you are one of the Rust fellas, aren't you?
Say that again. What? So I mean I just started learning Rust like uh, I don't know, I guess maybe a month ago or so. But I have to say I really do love the way Rust works so far. It just totally makes sense to me. Like, you have to handle every single case. Like, you know, when you do things with Solidity, you call some kind of external function or whatever. You sometimes just don't know what's going to happen. Like, you don't know, is this function always going to pass? Is it going to throw? For example, if you, I don't know, ABI decode some kind of data, then a normal developer isn't, or a new developer isn't necessarily going to know what the edge cases are. So they might call that function and then they expect, okay, I'm going to ABI decode some kind of data and I want to receive a Boolean. And they might just assume if it can't be decoded correctly, that the Boolean is going to be false or whatever. They might not know that there is that case where if the data can't be decoded correctly, that it's actually going to throw, and you're going to get some kind of panic, and then you're going to be in a state where your code doesn't function correctly. And in Rust, that just basically wouldn't happen because you have to explicitly handle every possibility of like getting an error in every function. So looking at that aspect inside of a blockchain system, it really does make sense. And I think I probably see more blockchain systems using Rust. I mean, many do already, but it would totally make sense to use that in the future.
Bro, I want to talk a little bit about the fun stuff now. So I want to talk about auditing. And before asking your methodology, I also want you to give us some input into how you approach B code bases, okay?
The deployment works in this way where you have contract A is deployed first, then contract B is deployed, it gets the dependency of A or something, and then you might have to call these functions to kind of initialize everything. I like to kind of start there just to get a rough overview of like what are the main contracts in the system. And those are probably also going to be where I'm going to start. And from those contracts, I just go and look for I often like to see like what are the external or public functions, like what are the entry points to this contract. What like if I was a malicious actor, what kind of degree of freedom do I have? And then just kind of note down all the functions and look at all the possibilities that I have. Like, can I manipulate this field? Is it some kind of unbounded array or whatever? But then, like if it gets bigger, I think what is also helpful is to look at flows. So if it's, for example, if it's some kind of staking contract, then I'm just going to look at one specific flow. I'm going to think of what is the process if I was a user, I wanted to stake, and then I would want to unstake. And just go from there, like look at the first function and then kind of see, check all of the steps that are necessary and just really make sure that I understand all of the assumptions that are handled, all of the edge cases there. And from there, I might go to a different flow and kind of understand that. And I think once you have a couple of those done, then at some point you just have like a good enough understanding of the whole system. But yeah, if it gets even bigger, that might not work, and well, it probably should work, but you might not be able to audit the whole system at one time. And that's when it's really helpful to work in a team, like I just mentioned before. If you have like some friends or whatever, and you decide to split up some parts of the contract, or for example, you say this team or this friend is going to look at the staking flow, and I'm going to look at the swapping flow, and we're just going to try to understand it in like as much detail as possible. Try to understand all of the assumptions, write those down, the edge cases, and then you try to present that to each other. And then also by just explaining and talking about the code, you do gain a lot of extra knowledge. And I guess what is also helpful is always having in mind, like asking the right questions for the code. Like basically asking, okay, what kind of exploits would even be possible? Like what could go wrong in this code? And I think it's really helpful to always just write down any kind of question you have, even if it might seem pretty simple or like a dumb question at first. But as long as you don't have like clarity on like all the small details of all of the questions, then you're not going to have like the full understanding of the system. So you basically just want to constantly write down questions, and then go through those questions and answer them in detail and make sure you understand all the assumptions and why this can't happen. Or maybe if you're lucky, it's actually going to end up being something exploitable. Um, but I think one thing I've noticed over time is that intuition is something that is extremely helpful and extremely um, it's something that you should try to cultivate. And if you have like a good intuition, you can often kind of feel for what areas of the code seem a bit funky, or if there's some kind of weird, I don't know, if condition or some kind of weird check or weird storage or some strange assumption. Often those cases are something you should note down, and then you should kind of dig in deeper and try to find out, okay, why does it feel weird? And then just make sure you have all of those edge cases covered, and often, yeah, often that can lead to something.
A lot of alpha in there, bro. Thank you so much for that. Face, one quick question for you is what is the usual size of the teams you see outside?
It really depends on the audit, I guess. Like sometimes, I mean, it's always a minimum of two, which is good because I have been, or I don't want to like name anything, but I do know that there's some groups that do single audits in auditing firms, which is, in my opinion, not so good. You should at least have some kind of redundancy, some kind of partner that you can throw ideas back and forth. But yeah, it goes up to 5, 6 people in the end.
And Phase, there's something that people are, especially auditors, are always worried with, and you actually understand, which is mathematics. So people are questioning all the time. Do I have to know math to audit? How often you actually encountering mathematics in smart contracts?
Um, it depends. It depends on the system. I think oftentimes you'll just encounter mathematics, which is like it's pretty common, and it's something that's going to reappear many times and in similar forms. For example, the AMM invariant, um, or like some kind of math that might be required in Uniswap. So, I mean, that's why I took a step to look at the Uniswap v3, and I just try to make sense of all the formulas for myself. And often, like once you have those figured out, it's like way less complex than it might seem. Even these like super fancy mathematical protocols, in the end, the math isn't so crazy if you spend some time looking at it. And I would say in general, I guess it doesn't. It's not a requirement, I would say, but it does help you in some cases. And so, I mean, oftentimes you can take the approach that you read the right white paper, you see the documentation, what this function should do, and then you just, I don't know, blindly check that this equation does exactly what it's supposed to do. But we've also had cases where, for example, there was a derivation of a formula which I just wanted to, again, make sense of myself, and then I tried deriving it, and then I ended up with a slightly different formula where a minus was turned into a plus. And then I checked in the code, and it was actually incorrectly there. It was incorrectly in the white paper and incorrectly in the code. But it was an edge case that was basically not being used at the moment. So in that case, like it could help you out. But again, I wouldn't say it's like a strict requirement.
Very interesting. Phase, something that I believe that makes a lot of really good researchers outshine, I would say, as knowledgeable ones is tooling. So I believe that some of these big crypto VCs they have all these blockchain tooling to trace transactions, maybe detect attacks. Is that actually something that's happening, or I'm imagining things?
Are you talking about like incident response
Like
teams? Like,
imagine all kinds of tooling that would be useful for a researcher, but are like under closed doors, So you have, things tracking the blockchain for attacks. You have, maybe things watching for liquidation bots, because I believe that researchers like Sam Zoom, he does, a lot of use of these kind of tools. Or do you think this is, maybe not so precise?
yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to just be an auditor that is kind of looking at code that is not maybe deployed yet, or are you someone who wants to be able to like join a war room where you have to have like a quick incident response, or do you want to be able to detect hacks happening at the moment? And I think for definitely for auditing, I don't really feel like there's any hidden tool that would just suddenly give you superpowers. I also think for looking at hacks that happened or some kind of attacks, they're pretty good tools for analyzing transactions. So, I mean, Etherscan, of course, is one of them, Tenderly, and like Samsung's transaction tracer. Again, I don't think there's anything special or anything secret that you have to really use there. And for like detecting these kind of attacks, I mean, there, I don't exactly know. There might be some kind of secret tools that are being used, but there's also, for example, I think Forta is open source, and they actually do a lot of static analysis on detecting malicious contracts. So they're specialized in detecting pre-attacks, or basically when a suspicious contract is deployed, which might try to exploit some other contract. And if you're interested in that, like I think just looking at their source code would be pretty helpful for that. And I think from there you could kind of also build your own tools.
Very nice, Phase. Very nice. Phase, what are your views on layer 2 solutions? So you think, because technically we're walking to cheap Ethereum at some point, right? After the merge, the splurge, the search. So what is your view on things like, side chains like Polygons and layer 2s like Optimism and Arbitrum?
Um, so you mean specifically in whether I believe if we're going to have like a multi-chain world, or
If you believe
basically
that this is important and relevant research.
if it's important and relevant research. I mean, for me, I don't know. I haven't spent super much time thinking about the question like whether it's whether sidechains are gonna survive, or other L1s, or if the future is only on L2s. I just think all kind of technologies are super cool. Like I'm interested in all of it, and I think as long as we have like more of everything, I'm fine with that.
Pretty cool, bro. Now let's talk a little bit about yourself. So, Face, what do you do for fun, bro? Like, what is your fun time?
learning learning more about some I don't know, some kind of protocol. No, I really love what I do. So it's pretty funny because I had this discussion with someone who or I mean, I basically have this discussion all the time. I feel like there's this kind of current idea of, your job is just supposed to be your job, and you're actually supposed to maximize your hobbies, or anything that is like non-related to your job. But like, what happens if you actually just really fucking love what you do? And for me, it's like, sometimes if I get off of work and I don't have like not forced to continue to work, and then I just think, okay, what would be the most fun thing to do right now? And it ends up being, okay, just maybe continuing coding something, or like reading up on some kind of protocol or whatever. And I think that's totally cool. But I mean, aside from that, I do have like some outside hobbies. Like I go climbing, I go hiking. Um, but yeah, in the last years, I've also more focused on kind of learning new stuff. And I mean, I also have like some small projects that I'm working on. Like I mean, just something small I can like talk about is, for example, I'm like writing a matrix multiplication library for Solidity, because I really want to see if we can have like some kind of simple form of neural networks in Solidity. Um, and I don't know, I just feel like there's so much to do. I mean, there's also like these emerging blockchain games. If you guys have heard of Matchbox style, for example, like they have some pretty cool contests. There's like some pretty cool stuff to do there. Or just learning cryptography. That's also something that I've been meaning to do more of.
Have a little bit of questions here from the guys, and first one is from Jad, and he's asking, when doing audits a tray of bits, do you see a lot of automated tools? I imagine you have internal tools which extend and improve public versions.
Mhm. Um, yeah, so we do have internal tools, and yeah, so there are like some enhanced versions of Slither, um, but I like I said before, like I don't think there's going to be like any magic tool that you have to use in order to be a successful or good auditor. I think in the end, like for me, the first and foremost thing I do is like a manual audit, and I do use tools. So definitely, if I find something, like you always have to write a proof of concept. Like you shouldn't be reporting something where you don't actually know whether it's possible or not. So you definitely, I mean, whichever tool fits best there, and you can use Echidna, you can use Foundry, um, and then also fuzz testing. I do that often when I see, for example, some kind of function which just seems a bit suspicious. Then as a first step, and maybe the manual review is pretty tough, pretty demanding, then as a first step, I'll kind of write a fuzz to maybe get some kind of quick answer. Even if the fuzz test doesn't succeed, or I mean, you don't find anything through the fuzz test, it doesn't mean that there is no vulnerability. I have had edge cases in things where I had a suspicion and I did some fuzz tests, and they nothing um, through by like really limiting my parameters, which took me a long time. I could get like better results, and I had to really expand the test runs. And like, for example, in one audit, that ended up finding a critical bug. Um, so yeah, again, just to recap, like first and foremost, manual audits, and then always use some kind of tools to test your proof of concepts.
Awesome. Second question is, are there ways to leverage mathematics in auditing? Edit. Higher levels of mathematics frameworks like abstract algebra, category theory, and number theory. I feel like static analysis tools are kind of trying to solve this kind of direction. Uh, um,
Hmm. I'm probably not the best to ask for this question. I'd love to learn more about static analysis, and yeah, they definitely use they use some kind of theory. I yeah, but in the end, you would basically just be using these static analysis tools, or in case you do mean like for developing static analysis tools, whether you need higher mathematics. I'm not too sure about that. I feel like that would be pretty niche. But if you're just asking about whether it would be helpful for normal auditing, like I said, like if you wanna like be very diligent and try to understand some kind of formula yourself, and derive it, it could be helpful. Um, but or also cryptography, there is very important. But I feel like you don't really have to understand the internals of, for example, EC Recover to be able to audit a contract that uses it. So in the end, you just kind of have to know how it works. What are the edge cases? What are some things to take care of? But yeah, I wouldn't say you really need that mathematical background necessarily.
Nice. I have another one. So I was wondering if you noticed an increase in ZK audits recently. Haven't seen any yet on Code for Arena. So yeah, have you seen an increase in ZK audits?
Yeah, definitely. I was also curious about not seeing too many on Code Arena, and I was actually just thinking about this today, whether there would be any like pure ZK audits on Code Arena. I do imagine that's going to be something we're going to see more of in the future. But yeah, definitely like the ZK space is, I guess, in its peak. Uh, yeah. So.
Very nice face. I'm gonna open. You guys wanna open the mic and make a question to Jet? If you wanna open your mic and talk, there's no problem. Okay. I'm just waiting for Jet to write his question. Yeah, nice. Okay, so wasn't a question. Phase, thank you very much, bro. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is it,
Thanks a
man.
lot. Thanks for doing this. Again, like it's great to have like this kind of effort done here, and like trying to bring the community further together. I think like these kind of community calls and like interviews, they're always super fun to watch and pretty helpful.
Thank you so much, bro. This means a lot coming from you, and we're gonna keep going. Let's gather more people, get to know more people, and get closer. Okay, I guess this is it. Thank you so much, Phase. I'll drop Phase Twitter and everything, and also make a post, and the video is coming out soon. Okay, guys.